Welcome back. Former President Trump's New York trial resumes today at 10 a.m. Eastern. Judge Merchan will give instructions to the jury, which should take about an hour. They'll begin deliberating until 4:30 p.m. today, and they'll continue tomorrow if a verdict is not reached. Deliberations could last anywhere from a few hours to a few weeks. Trump attorney Todd Blanche spending the majority of his closing arguments this week attacking Cohen's credibility, calling him the gloat, the greatest liar of all time, and accusing the prosecutors of using testimony from Stormy Daniels to embarrass Trump. Meanwhile, the prosecution defended the importance of Daniels' testimony, saying it illustrated the motive for a crime and that Cohen's corrupt bargain with Trump was crucial to his 2016 victory. Joining me now is Andrew Cherkasky. He is a former federal prosecutor. Andrew, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Tell us what you gleaned from all of this. What's most important? What should we be aware of?
Well, I think Todd Blanche gave the jury everything they need in order to reach an acquittal, to reach a verdict of not guilty in this case. And I think that's very justified under the circumstances. The prosecution failed entirely to prove some of the very basic elements of the crime here, specifically that the entry into the business records of legal expenses was incorrect. Not even a question of whether Donald Trump had a criminal intent in mind, but whether that should have been anything else. And being on Fox Business, I think that most business people know you book your expenses. Why wouldn't you book an expense to a lawyer as a legal expense? And if they can't get over that hurdle, they don't have a conviction. So I think that they're set up for an acquittal, but it's New York. It's a blue jury, and they could have holdouts. This could go any direction. I think the most interesting thing that could happen is a hung jury, and what would happen after that.
Yeah, a hung jury has to be a victory for Trump, even though they'll have to do a mistrial, right?
Well, you think of it as being a victory for Trump, but then the DA's office would have the option of retrying him, and they likely would. I mean, Alvin Bragg isn't likely to pull back at this point, and so then if it's a retrial, they can go back to trial almost immediately, and I think Judge Merchan could order this back to trial ahead of the November election. And so we could be going through this all over again because they don't have to do new discovery or new motions, anything like that. So they could be back at trial doing this all over before the election if it's a hung jury. So I don't know if that's the best outcome for Trump.
So it's either a hung jury or unanimous guilty or not guilty?
That's right.
Wow. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, well, I'm just wondering, you worked at the Justice Department. Have you ever seen somebody that's like, say, the number 2 or number 3 or number 4 leave that political appointee post to become a line prosecutor in a city?
So we're talking about the Colangelo piece here.
Yeah.
No, this looks like a plant. You know, you see from time to time certain people come in and out of the Justice Department and they go to kind of a specialized job or a more specialized job within the government somewhere. You usually don't go from federal to state. But the idea that Colangelo isn't part of the greater Biden conspiracy to take down Donald Trump, that's preposterous. He's absolutely at the center of it. And for Judge Merchan to have gagged Donald Trump on Colangelo specifically, I mean, he's a political player at this point. So I find all of that to be quite outrageous.
Well, you said that the final instructions that the judge is going to provide to the jury before deliberation is probably the most important thing that happens.
That's right, because the judge is telling the jury how to apply the facts to the law, what their big decisions are. And so when you take the law in this case and you look at some of the confusion that's been there, and we've all been complaining about it since the beginning, commentators on the left and right, we don't understand what the crime is. Not only do we not understand kind of the basic idea of why they think the misdemeanor is there, but they have to have this elevating second offense. And that second offense has been kept a secret the whole time. The defense has demanded further clarity on that. They've refused to give it. The judge hasn't required it. Now, as they get into the actual instructions, the judge is instructing the members that they don't have to even have a unanimous verdict as to their theory as to the secondary offense. And so we really have some outrageous kind of legal gymnastics going on, all of which would be ripe for appeal, and I think very strong appeals. But if he's convicted, I don't see any way he gets to the appellate court before the election. So then there'd be a conviction hanging over him, maybe overturned after he becomes the next president or loses the election, potentially because of this verdict. So the degrees of unfairness and injustice that are going on I think are really troubling, and those jury instructions are center to some of the problems that we have here.
That is just extraordinary that this is taking place right now. How do you see it?
I have to agree with Andrew. I am terrified about these jury instructions because when you look at the crux of this, Judge Merchan refuses to let the jury know that hush money payments are not illegal. And that is really important. What is hush money? They're settlement agreements. Let me tell you, reporters do this all the time. They worked in the Clinton campaign. They catched and killed many, many stories. And there is nothing wrong with that. There's nothing illegal with these types of settlement agreements. But the judge is refusing to allow that instruction to a jury. So there is so much chaos in that jury room. I am hoping that deliberations will only take a couple hours because there's two lawyers, and I have full faith that they can at least weave through some of these instructions and say, here's the crux, business records.
There were fireworks this week because Judge Merchan reprimanded Trump's lawyer, Todd Blanche, during the closing arguments yesterday. Blanche told the jury that they cannot send someone to prison based on the words of Michael Cohen. Merchan calling the statement outrageous, highly inappropriate, because jurors are not allowed to take punishment into consideration while deliberating. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik has filed an official misconduct complaint against Judge Merchan, insisting that his selection to handle Trump's case is not random at all, calling on the Inspector General of New York's court system to investigate. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this? Because, you know, this is the same judge that oversaw Steve Bannon and other areas of Trump's world. I mean, it wasn't random that they selected him, was it?
No, I think that we've got deep issues in the New York judicial process of getting judges selected. It has to be neutral and independent. It has to be random. It doesn't appear to be that way. He continues to be put on Trump cases one after another, and it sounds like there's some shuffling and poker playing going on within the judiciary to make that happen. So I think that that investigation is very important. And then yesterday, when we saw Judge Merchan kind of go after Todd Blanche, calling his argument outrageous, that's way over the top. That's an easy mistake to make as a defense counsel. You can say, you know, be very careful before you take away his freedom and liberty. And so to say jail, to kind of work that in there, I think it's a very general, generic reference to the idea of condemnation by a jury. Don't condemn this man. It has great consequence. To say that mentioning jail versus liberty, justice, freedom, those are very nuanced differences, and I think it's over the top to call that outrageous and to have lambasted him the way that he did.
Having said all that, it does mean jail.
Right.
Not necessarily. Donald Trump could avoid jail with a conviction here. And so I do worry that by mentioning that, it almost invites Merchan to send him to jail because his attorney said so. Your attorney said you'd go to jail if you were convicted. And there's mixed opinions, I think, in the legal community as to whether this crime under these circumstances calls for jail time. And I think Merchan has a very heavy task, if there's a conviction, to decide if there's any jail time, a day or a week, a month, whatever he is put in front of him.
Yeah.
But this does not call for jail time in most circumstances.
Well, that would be a new low for this country.
Yeah, after the civil trials and then now this, why would anyone have any faith in the New York State judicial system?
Can you imagine doing business in New York with any type of political magnifying glass on you? I mean, it's at a point at this time where everything that's been done to Donald Trump, I think, screams to business folks in New York that this is a very precarious place to be. And the politics that you bring to the table will have a direct impact on how the state investigates you and the potential that they try to put you in jail, where they don't do that to compatriots who are politically favorable.
Well, I mean, is the jury understanding that? Does the jury hear all of this? Is the jury going to say, listen, if I really discuss how I actually feel that this is all unfair and he should be acquitted, they'll come after me?
Yeah, I have faith in the jury system. I might be the fool. I've been doing legal work for a couple decades now, and I've had hundreds of juries, and they most often come back in a just way. And so I have to have faith in that in order to continue my job and stay sane. But there are issues and there are concerns here in New York. There's two attorneys on there. There's also some other very intelligent folks. There's very practical folks on there.
That's true, yeah.
And they've promised to be fair. I've
but the
seen
White
a lot
House
worse.
already said we're planning a tax on Trump if he gets acquitted. I mean, to say that right before the jury is about to deliberate, I mean, that's outrageous.
And then you got
want to have something outrageous,
yesterday.
Judge Merchan? That's outrageous.
Yeah.
For the White House to come out and say we're planning a tax on Trump should he be acquitted, and the jury hears that, they're going to say, well, I don't want to get attacked.
Everything I've heard on this panel just solidifies to me that this is such a politicized process. That's what we hear from people who are regular people who are watching it. It's what I hear when I talk to members of Congress about this charade, and it's why you see things like Chairwoman Stefanik trying to weigh in and take an opportunity to move those oversight things forward.
Mm-hmm. Great point. You know, I think there's so many things to unpack with the way that the country reacts or responds to the verdict, whichever way that goes. You know, if it's an acquittal, I think people have to, at that point, admit that there is a true injustice. Now you've got the Biden administration not ready to do that, I'm sure, and I'm sure that they'll have their own attack. Well, he was put on trial, and that means he's at least somewhat guilty. You know, trying to distort that. If he's convicted, they'll take their victory laps and try to run around that over and over again. And then finally, this whole mistrial, the hung jury potential and a mistrial, and do we go back there? And how do they take all of the other trials that are going on and try to capitalize on those? You know, it's lawfare, and I think that's the bottom line: is we're deep in a lawfare system, and it's a real problem.
Yeah, it sure is. Andrew, thank you so much for your insights. We've so appreciated Andrew Cherkasky joining us.